In this section, I'm going to talk about the impact of microbes on Earth. So microbes have shaped the development of the Earth's habitats and the evolution of other life forms for billions of years. Their presence affected the development of other microorganisms, and those microorganisms were forced to evolve along with the development of these microorganisms. Soon after the Earth was formed, the first ancient cells formed, and from them, bacteria and archaea developed. Eukaryotes appeared more than a billion years later. So the first organisms on Earth were prokaryotes. And here you can see more than 4 billion years ago, we have the ancestral cell type. And then about a little bit less than that, we had the development of bacteria and archaea. And then way later, about 2.5 billion years ago, is when the development of eukaryotes happened. And then insects developed, reptiles, mammals, and eventually humans. Evolution is the accumulation of changes that occur in organisms as they adapt to their new environments. So the theory of evolution is documented every day in all corners of the planet. It's an observable phenomenon, testable by science, and a label for a well-studied and well-established natural phenomenon. So when we think about evolution, some people think about evolution versus creation. And we don't necessarily need to go into that argument in this course, but evolution is a theory. And the theory is that all living organisms evolved from a primitive, earlier organism. And because we haven't seen new species develop, and they don't develop very quickly, we think that evolution isn't real. But there's a lot of DNA evidence and a lot of kind of phylogenetic trees that have been developed, and a lot of science that backs this theory that organisms evolved through random mutation. Random mutation caused certain traits to develop, and certain traits were more beneficial than others, which caused those organisms to live. We can see evolution really well in the field of microbiology, and because of their short lifespan and their rapid replication rate, we can watch it happen before our eyes. Microorganisms are evolving to have antibiotic resistance. So we used to not have antibiotic resistance before, but when we exposed these microorganisms to a drug, some of them had traits that allowed them to resist that antibiotic. And because the antibiotic was there, it was able to kill off the ones without those traits, leaving the ones with the antibiotic resistance traits. And those survived to reproduce and make more and more. And they, over many generations of cellular replications, they evolved to develop this resistance. In the field of microbiology, this is something that can be observed in a petri dish in a matter of a couple weeks. We can watch how a random organization of microorganisms can be selected for and can have the development of antibiotic resistance right before our eyes. So this is something that we can see today. Microbial involvement in shaping our planet. So microbes are deeply involved in the flow of energy and food through the Earth's ecosystems. Bacteria play a role in anoxygenic photosynthesis. The production of oxygen by microbes allowed species to diversify. So the initial Earth's atmosphere had no oxygen, but when microorganisms started to evolve the ability to release oxygen, oxygen started accumulating in the environment. And when oxygen was there, it allowed for a lot more energy production, and those organisms evolved ways to live in the presence of oxygen, and it allowed for a rapid diversity of life to emerge. Photosynthetic microorganisms, bacteria and algae, account for more than 70% of the Earth's photosynthesis, contributing to a majority of the oxygen in the atmosphere. So when we think about photosynthesis, a lot of us think of trees that are producing all this oxygen, and they do play a very important role, not only in oxygen production, but carbon dioxide consumption and keeping the Earth's temperature at the right range and preventing climate change and so forth. But bacteria and algae actually produce a majority of the oxygen that we need. Decomposition. So microorganisms play a major role in decomposition. Decomposition is the breakdown of dead matter and wastes, which is accomplished by bacteria and fungi. And this is actually where antibiotics come into play. So there's a dead carcass here, and it looks kind of gross, but there's two different types of microorganisms on that carcass. There's bacteria and fungi, and they're fighting each other for the nutrients that are found in this carcass. So when they're fighting each other, they need to fight with a chemical. So I mean, if you want to go pick a fight with someone on the street, you can fight with your words, with your hands, whatever you want to do. But these microorganisms don't have that, so they need to find a way to fight each other. So during this fight, they developed antibiotics. And antibiotics are basically chemicals that they throw at each other to try to kill each other off. There's other types of antibiotic-like substances, like bacteriocins, which are proteins they throw at each other to try to kill each other. But true antibiotics, these are protein-like substances that are produced by one microorganism to kill off another competing microorganism. And we'll talk more about antibiotics and their development discovery a little bit later in this course. This is just kind of a cool place to talk about the fight between bacteria and fungi, and why they're fighting here is fighting over this resource. Microbes are the main forces that drive the structure and content of soil, water, and the atmosphere. So gas is produced by microorganisms, microbes live within the Earth's crust, and bacteria and fungi live in complex associations with plants and animals. Humans have been using microorganisms for thousands of years to improve life and even shape civilizations. So yeast has been used for the production of beer, wine, and bread. Other fungi are used for cheese production. Moldy bread used to be used by ancient Egyptians to treat wounds. So they used to rub moldy bread on wounds. Now, why would they do that? Well, if you think to what I was just talking about with the fight over the dead carcass there, we had molds that were trying to fight bacteria using antibiotics. Now, even though ancient Egyptians didn't know antibiotics existed, they knew that if they rubbed mold on a wound, the bacterial infection would decrease, or the severity of the disease would go away. Again, they didn't know about bacteria, fungi, they didn't know about antibiotics, and these things weren't classified back then. But they knew that mold could prevent further illness. So they knew that there was something there that would help them treat those wounds. Biotechnology is the manipulation of microorganisms to make products in an industrial setting. So we talked about industrial microbiology before. So biotechnology is manipulating those microorganisms in order to do something in industry. So to produce a food, to rectify food contamination, and so forth. Genetic engineering manipulates the genes of microbes, plants, and animals for the purposes of creating new products and genetically modified organisms. Now, many people think that genetically modified organisms are not natural. They have strong opinions against them, but they have been shown to have some benefit, and genetically modified organisms are found all over the place. Recombinant DNA technology, techniques that allow for the transfer of genetic material from one organism to another and deliberately alter DNA. So in this recombinant DNA technology, we've been using viruses to insert genetic material into cancer cells to try to kill cancer. We have created insulin, like I talked about previously. So we have developed the ability to transfer genetic material into a bacterium to make that bacteria produce medications for us. Bioremediation is the introduction of microbes in the environment to restore stability or clean up toxic pollutants. So we have genetically engineered bacteria to be able to eat oil. So if there's a large oil spill, we're going to throw this bacteria into the water. It's going to eat all the oil and eventually run out of a food source and die off. So it's a way that we can help clean up the environment and using these microorganisms. So bioremediation, bio is talking about using living organisms. Remediation is to remediate or to fix something that needs our attention.